I now call on Stewart Stevenson to be followed by Cameron Buchanan. A very generous 6 minutes.
The word "very" is duly noted, Presiding Officer. Let me just start by saying that I think it's very clear from the debate thus far that there is a pretty broad consensus, it may stop at the aisle along to my right, that this is an important issue where we have shared objectives. If we differ, I think it's about means, not about objectives. And let me just commend two speeches that we've had so far that I think have best illustrated that consensus and the nature of the challenge. And the most recent one from Siobhan McMahon, a subject she's taken close interest in over a period of time, while not necessarily agreeing with everything she said, no one who listened could doubt the commitment from Siobhan McMahon. And I thought Mike McKenzie today made an outstanding speech that captured the essence of the debate from these benches. Now, the motion that's before us from the government talks quite properly about enhancing commercial viability through business support and action to increase public and private sector procurement. Now, we've talked about the quality of the products that can be produced from supported businesses, and that's correct. Very, very early in my married life, and I've now been married for 45 years, the very first bed that we bought was bought from Blindcraft, and it was an excellent product at an excellent price, and it was delivered to us. And I'm sure many of us have had very good interactions with supported businesses at various stages in our life. Now, why did I go to Blindcraft? First of all, because I knew about them, and I felt that I wanted to support them. But also, economically, it made sense to go there, and I bought a good product. It's disappointing to hear, as we have heard, that there's comparatively little money available to help these businesses market themselves, and I think that's something we might all ponder from here on in. Profit. Let's just talk about what profit actually is. It's really quite interesting. In Inclusion Scotland's contribution to us as members in advance of the debate, they highlight, for example, in relation to the DWP's Access to Work scheme, that for every pound the Access to Work scheme the Treasury spends on that, they actually receive £1.60 in additional tax. So actually, as an intervention by the DWP, it makes a profit. And I think that leads us from the particular to the general. And that is that when we support people who require a supported environment in which to work, the odds are that the economics of that make sense. Because if we have people who have dropped out of the system, who, because of lack of social contact, lack of income, lack of being integrated into the wider community, require more economic and social support, the cost of these people rises. So there is actually a profit. You know, we don't have to be moral about this. It's almost certainly economically sensible. But the trouble is that this is being conflated into all people who require any money from the state are people who leeches on the state and must be cut to the bone, when the reality is a proper economic look at this would come up with a very different view. Now, there are some interesting things as well that happen in supported industries. There are some of them, and I've been trying to look around the world, who are keeping old crafts alive. For example, in the town of Soredi in France, there is what is thought to be the last manufacturer of whips. Yes, I know we can all think of some uses for whips in this debate and many others. And they are using local materials to do it, and they are a supported business. And often you get these little niches that are really of value and really of interest. So things are happening all around the world one way or another. Now, let me just quote from the New Statesman in 2013, and they make one or two interesting observations in relation to this subject. And the first one is perhaps we need to be slightly careful about when the reduction of the number of people employed in the supported business sector started. In 2008, the first round of closures started under the Labour government, with 1,600 workers being given the boot at that point. And the DWP suggests only 200 of that 1,600 were successful in getting jobs, and that's 5 years later we're looking at. So it is a long-run problem, and I don't think we should particularly point at any single individual or any single government. I think what's being done now is certainly not going to be helpful. Now, Jim Sheridan asked a question in the House of Commons in 2013 on the 4th of March about the £8 million that had supposed to be made available to ex-Remploy people to find work or access benefits. And it does appear, both on Esther McVeigh's answer, but more fundamentally in the work that Private Eye, a print publication for which I have the highest regard, that it's unclear whether anybody got anything out of that, that most of the money seems to have been spent on unpaid volunteering, work experience or coffee mornings. So even the money that has been available to support people in this position seems, on the basis of that, not to have been wisely deployed. Now, people with disabilities, we meet them in our everyday life. I regularly go to a local cafe where some of the staff, a majority of the staff, are people with disabilities, working not in a supported enterprise, but a supported environment within an enterprise. So there are many different models that will suit many different people. Now, the government and the government's companies and agencies do very well. And I particularly remember, as a minister, visiting CalMac's office in Gourock and meeting Eric Ruthven, who'd started working there in the 1990s, having come out of a supported environment. He's now a valued member of staff there. He's probably the best-known member of staff of people who get the ferry at Gourock, and he is in receipt of an MBE for the charitable work that he's been doing in the local area. So we should never underestimate people with disabilities. Now, let's just close, Presiding Officer, by thinking about companies, private companies, big private companies, small private companies, public companies. There is increasing pressure on companies in a number of ways to behave in moral ways. We're actually seeing increasing adoption of the living wage, for example, without legislative requirements. And that's good news. Corporate responsibility, social responsibility, is a thing that is debated in many boardrooms across these islands. This is the next subject that we should try and make sure is debated there. We could, of course, do what the Danes have just put into legislation, for example, in relation to the environment, where companies now have to give an environmental statement as part of their annual reporting. We could see that providing a useful thing here. And finally, Presiding Officer, just to address the 118, I've been racking my brains to see, looking at the list of the 20 supported businesses, what exactly the Water Industry Commissioner of Scotland would be able to buy from any of these 20 businesses. I'm sure very eager to do so. They've got a good complement of furniture that's relatively modern. If the Presiding Officer allows me, which he does, I will.
Jenny Mara.
Officer, I think I made it clear to the Minister that what I was suggesting was that there was a mandate of at least one public contract to local authorities and to health boards, which we know buy uniforms and beds that are made by sheltered workplaces. If the Minister would then like to maybe exclude quangos that he knows, like Scottish Water, who do not buy anything that supported businesses make, then that would be a decision for government.
Finally, Mr Stevenson.
Presiding Officer, I'm not quite sure if I've been reinstated in a previous position, because I appeared to be being addressed as Minister there. But let me reply anyway. The amendment says 118. May I merely suggest, in the most kind way, that my colleagues in the Chamber must proofread their amendments more carefully before submitting them, because 118 certainly includes the Water Industry Commissioner of Scotland. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible for them at some future date, but I think if you were to make it a legal requirement, it would be a substantial difficulty. Presiding Officer, thank you for the extra time.